Time to put the spotlight on the politics behind the budget. Was this really an election budget? We're heading into polls in a year from now. Has Chidambaram done all he could to woo the electorate in this budget as well? Let's introduce our panel that's joining in for this leg of the debate. Kapil Sibal, Telecom Minister, Rajiv Pratap Rudy from the BJP and Sitaram Yechuri from the CPM. And of course, we've got Swaminathan Aiyar still very much with us here. Swami, your take has been that good economics has prevailed over bad politics. If that's the case, then this cannot be an election budget.
No, I'm making the case that this is an attempt to show that good economics can also be good politics. There has been a tradition that in an election year, you give away lots of populist freebies and this is the way you win an election. And yet in 80% of the cases when you do that, you actually lose the election. So, I mean, whatever are the pyrotechnics on budget day is very different from what is the situation on the ground 12 months later on when the election is coming. And in many ways, what really matters is the actual thing 12 months later on, when many of the budget pronouncements have been forgotten or almost forgotten. One of the most important things which will be pinned on a government, on the central government, is inflation. This is often forgotten. You can make any promises you like, but at the end of it all, if inflation is high, that is one thing which will kill you at election time. I think this particular government faced a real threat. The real threat was, had there been a credit downgrade by Moody's and Standard & Poor's, money would have flown out of the country, the rupee would have crashed to 60 rupees to the dollar. When that happened, all import prices would have gone up and inflation would have hit 15%. The real threat to Congress really was this. This is the threat that has been warded off. The credit downgrade is not going to happen. The rupee is not going to collapse to 60. On the other hand, there's some prospect it may actually strengthen to 53 or 54. That would exert a downward pressure on prices. I'm not sure what the inflation rate is going to be at the end of the year, because that's a long time off. But there is an actual prospect that if the inflation rate is brought down to something like 4.5%, 5% by the election time, Chidambaram would have achieved more through that to win votes than any other populist measures. I would add, of course, that even this, I'm afraid, will not be enough to win the election.
All right, may not be enough to win the elections, but let's get the politician on the board. And Chidambaram's colleague in the Union Cabinet, Kapil Sibal, I want to throw this question to you. Chidambaram's budgets are known to have this one game-changing idea. This one lacks one. Do you believe that the finance minister has lost the last opportunity he perhaps had ahead of the elections?
I think what the finance minister has done with a steady head on his shoulders and his feet firmly on the ground, to take into account the realities not just of the global market, but the situation in India, and in the context of the large fiscal deficit and the large current account deficit, try to balance between incentives to investment, increasing the savings rate, and at the same time having enough money for the social sector schemes.
All right, Rajiv Pratap Rudy, I want to take this question to you. Chidambaram has resisted the temptation of being populist. As the main opposition, do you agree?
Well, in last 4 years, this government has virtually made the government has become bankrupt. And even if they would have wanted, and especially in the backdrop of inflation and food inflation and overall inflation and the lack of investment in both in infrastructure and the social sector, I don't think they have enough to spend. And if they had attempted to do so, the country would have completely gone for a six, and the entire institution of finance in this country would have collapsed. As also you can see that the FIIs, the FDIs coming in this country has dropped drastically. And if you look at all the three sectors, whether it's agriculture, services or manufacturing, I hardly see any positive investments or positive effort by the government to see that these sectors get a boost. So it's basically a lackluster budget. It's basically a budget which does not excite anyone.
Right. Mr. Rudy, it's great to hear the BJP talk about FII, FDI, given the BJP's sudden opposition to FDI and retail. But I want to get the view from the left as well. Sitaram Yechuri, what's your sense? Because Swami here clearly believes that even in an election year, Chidambaram has resisted the temptation of being populist.
Well, I think most of the populism will come through non-budgetary announcements. But even in the budget, if you notice, there is two very important things which he's also highlighted, which will be the flagship for the next election campaign. One is the direct benefits transfer scheme, and the other is the food security bill. So these two, which he flagged off in the budget, but both will have to come through separate legislations before the Parliament. So I think the budget is not the platform that they're going to use for their populism, but it will be outside of the budget.
Do you agree with Mr. Yechury here that much of the populism could come in the next 6 months? You know, I for one believe it's going to be tough for the government to keep moving with partial diesel decontrol. Hiking diesel prices every month, just a few months before the budget, is surely not going to be easy. At some point, populism will kick in, wouldn't it?
I mean, that would mean surrender. That would mean a lack of understanding of what you want to do. If the government has understood what it wants to do, look, you've already had one price increase in January, one in February. Have you had inflation going through the roof? The notion of cost plus economics, cascading prices, this is a false economics. I mean, there's the alternative of Milton Friedman who will tell you all inflation is only a monetary phenomenon. I won't necessarily go along with that. But yes, it is significantly a monetary phenomenon. Therefore, the idea that, every time you increase diesel prices by 50 paise, everybody will go saggy at the knees and begin to collapse. This is a fiction. When I became a journalist back in 1965, all oil was on import price parity. If the world price went up, it just went up. But at that time, there was controls on the steel price. So every time the steel price went up a little, there was a huge hue and cry. Why? Because you had politicized it. What's really happened in the case of diesel is we have politicized the price of diesel. That is why there used to be a big ruckus. If you merely say within the marketplace there is a certain adjustment to the reality of higher import prices, sir, that adjustment has taken place in edible oils, it has taken place in steel, it has taken place in a whole lot of other issues. Why not in oil too? It can be done if you take the politics out of it. So I think the government can stay the course on this particular one. I think, I'll also say, Rudy said, the government was bankrupt, it had no money, so how could it do any populism? I think I'd say on that, it's worth noting that they are providing for an increase in planned spending of 29%. They didn't have to do that much. Part of that, you could very easily have diverted 50,000 crores of that to a populist scheme. They've resisted that part. Give them credit for that much.
All right, give them credit where they deserve, but let's keep the populism and the politics on track because Sitaram Yechury made a point about food security bill. Kapil Sibal, do you believe this is UPA's big political bet ahead of general elections?
So I don't know why you look at everything in terms of politics. So when we talk about food security, who are we talking about? We're talking about ensuring accessible food grains, accessible food items to people in this country who have no capacities to pay. Is that politics? I don't think it's anything to do with politics. It's something to do with the concern of the UPA to the vast majority of people who have no wherewithal to access essential items for life.
Fair point. Rajiv, Rudy, comment on the food security bill because, it's going to be tough for you to criticize this one. Do you believe it's a strong bill, even though it may be UPA's brainchild? Do you think it benefits the poor? 10,000 crore additional subsidy is largely affordable to the fisc as well. Swami says it doesn't disrupt the balance as well. Will the BJP support?
Well, we actually do not know the fate of the food security bill because the actual food subsidy bill, which is around 75,000 crores, and he has provided over and above that another 10,000 crores. But what is the shape of that bill, how it is going to be implemented, what is the format and how much resources they are going to. We are absolutely for any social programs which has to come. But Mr. Chidambaram has made a statement that this budget is not all. He is going to is keeping few things close to his chest and that he would disclose it on when he replies to the budget when it is to be passed. So I find this whole budget exercise which was done was actually half-hearted exercise. It was an attempt to hoodwink the nation.
All right, we want the politicians to fight on the show as much, but let's just take this discussion away from politics for a minute because we've got actually the telecom minister talking to us. Revenue mobilization, Mr. Sibal, is a big concern for the government given the present scenario. Even spectrum has actually ceased to be a valued resource. So where will money then really come from?
Well, first of all, if all ministries were to spend 5,50,000 crores, which is part of the planned budget, and with possible disinvestment proceeds of 40,000 crores, and spectrum which is going to be sold. I mean, it may not have attracted the market during the previous auction, but spectrum will be sold, and we will get money for it. That, along with without boosting investments in India, creating jobs in India, I think that we shall have enough resources to not just to finance this budget, but have enough money to look forward to a growth rate of 6.1 to 6.7% next year.
All right, let's also put the spotlight on the opposition. Mr. Rudy, the finance minister, spoke about the goods and services tax. He's earmarked 9,000 crores for compensation. How confident are you that the political logjam will break over this? Isn't it time that BJP supports the goods and services tax and gets this off the ground?
Well, he has talked about it. There is a discussion which is on. The group of state finance ministers who are working on it. I'm sure something is going to come out, but at this point of time, we'll see how the government moves about it.
All right, we'll see how the government supports it. Everybody's talking about the GST. They think it's going to be the big game changer. You do believe that Chidambaram has surrendered to the states?
I think Chidambaram has wisely taken the position that he cannot crack the whip on the states. That's very, very clear. It has to be voluntary. After all, you also require a constitutional amendment supported by all the state governments, which he does not control. So I think it's been clear from the start that this is not some process that New Delhi can drive. I regret to say the pace of what I see finance ministers doing, I do not find encouraging. Mr. Chidambaram has said, I hope we get all this thing done by the end of the year. Listening to Mr. Rudy right now, I don't feel enthused that this is going to be wrapped up within 6 months. It seems to me that there's a lack of seriousness about really going ahead, although nobody is really seriously against it.
We began by talking about how it is perhaps a case of good economics that has perhaps prevailed over bad politics. We go back to politics all over again, don't we, Sandeep?
Oh yes, absolutely. Supriya, before we wrap this up, there's only one man whose opinion I trust as far as the budget is concerned, and he's sitting with you, Swaminathan Aiyar. I'm suddenly feeling jealous. Swami, on a scale of 1 to 10, last word, you're the only one we're asking this to. How much would you rate this budget? Would you give it a 7 on 10?
I'll give 7.5 out of 10.
You know, actually, I think Mr. Chidambaram should be a happy man. A 7.5 on 10 from Swaminathan Aiyar. He should be sleeping a happy man tonight.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Mr. Rudy, Kapil Sibal, Sitaram Yechury, and of course Swami for leading this discussion and leading the budget coverage on ET Now all day. It's been wonderful having you with us all day on ET Now. We'll wrap it up here. That's the verdict with Swami. He's given it 7.5 on 10. Thank you so much for watching this special show, Verdict with Swami, right here on ET Now.